At 30,000 feet, a captain's command is law. Or so everyone believed on Flight 721. Captain William Reynolds had worn his uniform like armor for 30 years. To him, the cockpit was a kingdom and he was its ruler. But that illusion was about to shatter in front of 200 silent witnesses. The day began like any other at JFK Terminal 4. The air smelled of recycled coolness and jet fuel, a mix every traveler knew too well. Among the long line of boarding passengers was a quiet 17-year-old named Zara Bennett. Her gray hoodie, faded jeans, and old headphones made her blend in perfectly with the crowd. That was the point. She wanted to disappear. Her ticket read Seat 12B, a middle seat. Uncomfortable, but unimportant. Zara's father had offered her first class, but she had refused. "No special treatment, Dad," she had said that morning. "If I want to see what it's really like to fly with this airline, I have to be just another passenger." Her father, Daniel Bennett, wasn't just any parent. He was the new majority owner of Pinnacle Airlines, a company he'd taken over to fix from the inside. Corruption, arrogance, and discrimination had infected its core. He needed real insight into how passengers were treated, and Zara had volunteered to be his eyes and ears. No one knew the teenager on board was the daughter of the man who now owned the airline. As she settled in, the hum of conversation and metallic clicks of overhead bins created the usual pre-flight rhythm. The woman by the window smiled politely. The man on the aisle was already absorbed in his phone. Zara pulled out her paperback and began reading, quietly observing everything around her, just as her father had trained her to. Document, don't intervene. Up in the cockpit, Captain Reynolds checked his controls with the same mechanical precision he'd repeated thousands of times. His silver hair, sharp jaw, and stiff posture told a story. An old-school pilot, proud and stubborn. He still believed the skies belonged to men like him, strict, commanding, unquestioned. But lately, the world had changed. Airlines now emphasized empathy, inclusivity, customer rights, words Reynolds privately called nonsense. His first officer, Miguel Alvarez, half his age and twice as cautious, sensed the captain's tension. "Clear skies all the way to Atlanta," Miguel said, trying to lighten the mood. Reynolds only grunted. His attention flicked to the small monitor showing cabin footage. His gaze locked on one passenger, a teenage girl in a gray hoodie. "Seat 12B, he muttered. "She keeps glancing around." "Watch her eyes." Miguel leaned closer. "Looks normal to me. Maybe nervous first-time flyer." Reynolds didn't answer. Something about the girl unsettled him. Not her actions, but the way she didn't fit his unspoken idea of who belonged in his aircraft. Minutes later, Sophia Davis, the lead flight attendant, made her rounds. 12 years in the air had given her instincts sharper than radar. The cabin energy felt wrong, too quiet, too tense. She peeked into the cockpit. "Coffee before pushback, Captain?" "Black, 2 sugars," he replied curtly, still staring at the screen. "And tell your crew to keep an eye on row 12. Sophia frowned. "Problem. Just do as I say." By the time boarding ended, Zara was fully immersed in her book. She didn't notice the captain emerging from the cockpit until his shadow fell across her tray table. The cabin fell silent. A pilot outside the cockpit before takeoff always drew attention, but this time, there was something heavier in the air. Suspicion. "Miss," Reynolds said sharply, his tone dripping with authority. "I need you to gather your belongings and come with me." Zara looked up, startled. "Is there a problem?" "Security concern," he said. "You've been acting suspiciously." A murmur rippled through nearby passengers. The businessman beside her frowned. "She's been reading the whole time." "What's suspicious about that?" Reynolds ignored him. "Comply, or I'll have airport security remove you." Sophia appeared at his side, her face composed but tense. "Captain, maybe we should handle this privately." "This is my aircraft, Miss Davis," he snapped. "Stand down." Zara felt the eyes of dozens of strangers burning into her, fear mixed with disbelief. She had expected poor service, not humiliation. Her pulse quickened, but her voice remained calm. "Captain, I have a valid ticket. If you can tell me what security threat I pose, I'll leave." Reynolds leaned closer, his voice a low hiss. "Don't play games, young lady. I've been flying longer than you've been alive. I know trouble when I see it, trouble," she repeated softly. "Or something else?" The tension cracked. A woman across the aisle stood. She hasn't done anything. I saw her, she's just reading. Reynolds barked, "Sit down, ma'am." Sophia's jaw tightened. "Captain, this is escalating." "Then escalate it," he thundered. "Because this flight doesn't leave until she's off my plane." Phones came out. Cameras rolled. Someone whispered, "Is this discrimination?" Zara took a slow breath. Her father's voice echoed in her head, "You'll know when it's time to stop observing." She straightened in her seat. "No," she said simply. "I'm not leaving." The single word echoed through the cabin like a spark hitting dry kindling. The captain's face hardened. "Then you'll regret that decision." Sophia stepped forward, heart pounding. "Captain, with all due respect, this isn't right." But it was too late. The confrontation had begun, and before it ended, every life on that plane would change forever. When power collides with truth, the skies aren't the only thing that turn. The cabin of Flight 721 had turned into a courtroom in the clouds. Every passenger sat frozen, waiting to see what would happen next. Captain Reynolds stood like a storm in uniform, his voice slicing through the tense silence. "This flight isn't moving until she's off this plane," he declared. The teenager in seat 12B, Zara Bennett, met his glare calmly. Her hands rested on her lap, but her voice held a quiet strength. "Captain, I've done nothing wrong. If you have evidence, state it. Otherwise, I'm staying right here." A businessman beside her folded his arms. "She's right. You can't just throw someone off a plane because you feel uncomfortable." The cabin erupted into whispers. Phones were raised, cameras recording. The quiet confrontation had become a public reckoning. Sophia Davis, the lead flight attendant, took a step forward. "Captain, I have to object. This passenger hasn't shown any suspicious behavior." Reynolds turned on her, fury in his eyes. "That's insubordination, Miss Davis. I'll be filing a report the moment we land." "If we ever take off," someone muttered from the back. Reynolds ignored them. "Security," he shouted. "Get this passenger off my aircraft." But it wasn't security that appeared at the cabin door. It was Anthony Whitman, the head of airport operations, and behind him 2 people in formal suits. The passengers fell silent. Zara's eyes widened as she recognized one of them. Her father, Daniel Bennett, tall, composed, and every bit the man used to commanding boardrooms, stepped into the aisle. His expression was unreadable as he looked from Reynolds to his daughter. "Good afternoon, Captain," he said, his tone deceptively polite. "I'm here regarding my daughter, the passenger you're attempting to remove." Reynolds froze, confusion flashing across his face. "Your daughter?" "Yes," Daniel replied calmly. "And coincidentally, I also happen to own this airline." A stunned murmur rippled through the cabin. The captain blinked, disbelief giving way to alarm. "You're the new owner?" "Majority shareholder," Daniel corrected. "Let's discuss what just happened." Reynolds's tone softened instantly, but his arrogance refused to die. "Mr. Bennett, this was a routine security matter. I had concerns about this passenger's behavior." "What behavior?" Daniel interrupted sharply. Reynolds hesitated. She kept looking around. Watching the exits, she was reading a book, Sophia interjected. "I've been observing her since boarding." "She's done nothing wrong." An elderly man in row 3 stood up. "That's true. I saw it all. This young lady was quiet and polite." Another passenger added, "He's lying. He just didn't like how she looked." Daniel turned slowly, surveying the passengers who had found their voices. "Thank you," he said sincerely before returning his attention to Reynolds. "Captain, you accused a 17-year-old of being a security threat with no basis. You humiliated her in front of an entire cabin. Tell me, is this your definition of safety?" Reynolds flushed red. "I made a judgment call." "No," Daniel cut in, his voice rising just enough to silence the cabin. "You made a biased call. There's a difference." The captain's jaw clenched. "Sir, I am still the authority on this aircraft." "Not anymore," Daniel said evenly. "You are relieved of duty, effective immediately." A collective gasp swept through the plane. Even Sophia froze. Reynolds's face turned ghostly pale. "You can't fire me. I'm the captain." Daniel nodded toward Anthony Whitman. "Please escort Captain Reynolds off this aircraft." The security chief stepped forward. "Captain, you'll need to come with me." Reynolds stood stiffly, his knuckles white. "You're ending 30 years of service over one misunderstanding. No, Daniel replied coldly. You ended your own career the moment you chose prejudice over professionalism. As Reynolds was led toward the exit, the passengers began to clap, not out of mockery but relief. Justice, long overdue, had found its moment at 30,000 feet. When the door closed behind the disgraced captain, Daniel turned to the stunned passengers. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for what you've witnessed today. This airline was supposed to represent excellence, not arrogance. From this moment forward, that changes. Zara blinked back tears, equal parts pride and disbelief. Her father's calm authority had shifted the entire plane. Within minutes, Daniel spoke to operations through his phone. Ground every Pinnacle flight worldwide. Effective immediately, the flight attendants gasped. Sir, all of them? All of them, he said firmly. We fix this from the ground up, or not at all. The announcement spread like wildfire. News outlets exploded with headlines. Billionaire grounds entire airline after daughter faces discrimination. 3 days later, the company headquarters buzzed with controlled chaos. Cameras flashed, reporters swarmed. At a press conference, Daniel Bennett stood at the podium beside Sophia Davis and Miguel Alvarez, now promoted to captain. What happened on Flight 721 was not an isolated mistake, Daniel told the crowd. It was a symptom of a broken culture. We are rebuilding Pinnacle Airways to ensure respect and equality aren't optional. They're mandatory. Behind him, a new emblem flashed on the screen, 2 silver wings embracing a globe. The Davis Initiative, named after the flight attendant who had dared to speak up. Sophia addressed the employees watching live around the world. Our job isn't just to get passengers from one place to another, she said. It's to ensure every single person feels safe, valued, and seen. Months later, Pinnacle Airways became the model for change in aviation. New training, independent oversight, and passenger rights programs transformed the company's image. Other airlines followed. As for Captain Reynolds, his license was suspended, his reputation ruined. The man who once claimed he was God in the sky was now grounded permanently. A year later, Zara stood on stage at an aviation diversity event, confident, radiant, her voice strong. A year ago, I was told I didn't belong on a plane, she said. Today, I stand here to remind the world, the sky belongs to everyone. Applause thundered through the hall. Her father watched from the front row, pride glinting in his eyes. The girl who had quietly said no had sparked a revolution, and as the world looked up to the skies again, one truth remained clear. Sometimes it takes just one quiet voice to bring an empire of arrogance crashing down.